So now you're doing the fucking pancake, right? You're doing the pancake, all right? Which is another way of saying what? Well, because of the way you set this up, right? What you're trying to do is you're trying to get that 29, right? Which you've rebranded as Hodge, which is not actually correct, right? Because you promised them around that time that you were going to deliver those 29s, which brings the question up: well, how did you even get access to them? Did you get access to them through CENTCOM? You mean those Palestinian pilots? I'm sorry. Those Jordanian pilots through CENTCOM, right? I mean, that's a pretty big deal. And as I recall, there were people that were opposed to it, which is why they only got half the deal, right? Yeah. Okay. All right. What were you talking about? No, you're incorrect, because what did the DOJ do within at least the last 5 days? What did the Department of Justice do within the last 5 days? Well, for at least the last year, the Department of Justice has had a English language translation of the Ukrainian Constitution that's mistranslated, and it's intentionally mistranslated. If you cross-reference the English language Constitution of the Ukraine that is available through or used to be available through the Department of Justice website, not only is it coded to the metric 14, which is completely fucking heinous for a number of reasons I'll acknowledge in a second, but it is completely different from the English language translation of the Ukrainian Constitution provided on the ministry website of the Ukraine. And what happened in the autumn of 2020? Does anybody remember when, at least allegedly, right, that Zelensky got COVID? And see, when these heads of state ended up announcing they had COVID, who was the first head of state that announced he had COVID? Well, depending on where you look, right? The first person, if I recall correctly, was Boris Johnson, wasn't it? Who was after Boris Johnson? Juan Orlando Hernandez, the former president of Honduras. Where's he at right now? Hernandez is in the United States right now. Presumably, he's being brought up on charges of drug trafficking. The second former president of Honduras arrested and brought to the United States, but only bookended between somebody else, right? So Hernandez is presumably right now in the United States being brought up on charges, again, among other things, of trafficking cocaine, right? Other kinds of charges related to drug trafficking. I read the indictment today, going all the way back to 2002, 2004, right? All right. So we got that. But in succession, who were the other heads of state that got COVID? I did a review. And over the summer of 2020, there was a 24-hour period, plus or minus, comparable to a process engaged around executive orders and 10-day periods that were engaged by Barack Obama while he was in office, correlating with the alleged attacks on holy centers around the world, mostly mosques, but also involving Christian centers, and at least in one case involving an attack outside of Temple Mount, right, in Jerusalem, right? So within 24 hours, plus or minus, of a number of declarations of heads of state being identified with COVID-19, were major deadlines in my case that has actually been coming up, and some of which are still to come, including in next week, right? Next week will be the 5th anniversary, and I know that you want to follow through on what you've been doing since January 3rd, which is it's 5 years, it's time to convert, and that's what you've been trying to draw your fucking Christian Zionist stock shit on, right? After all this time of all this horrible torture, I'm supposed to believe now all of a sudden the angels have descended and the Christians are pious and they're about ready to get their holy delivery. It's all a bunch of fucking bullshit. But what happened with Zelensky? Within a week of Zelensky being diagnosed of COVID-19, there was a declaration that he had had a significant dispute with members of the judiciary in the Ukraine because he was discussing with them the constitutional court as opposed to the administrative court. They have an administrative court system in the Ukraine. I've looked through the rules of the administrative court, and I've read through the Constitution of the Ukraine, both the one, or at least parts of, excerpted from the ones of the Department of Justice for comparison, as well as the English language translation that's actually provided by the Ukraine. But they don't have the Constitution of the Ukraine on the Department of Justice website anymore. They took it off within the last 5 days, and instead what they have is the criminal code, the Court of Criminal Appeals. They have the criminal code of the Ukraine, but not the Constitution. And this is the fucking setup. This is the fucking setup. Why did the United States, through the Department of Justice, for years, allow for a completely fraudulent, intentionally defamatory act of securities fraud in the form of an alleged English translation of the Ukrainian Constitution to be put on the Department of Justice website and leave it there until within the last couple of days? Why did they remove it within the last few days? Did members of the Department of Justice in the United States conspire to attack Zelensky with biological weapons as a way to chastise him for what he said about the judiciary in the Ukraine? Doesn't that sound a lot like something that happened to somebody else in 2009? Yes, it does. Doesn't that sound a lot like something else that happened to people in this country? Yes, it fucking does. Why did the Department of Justice allow for an act of securities fraud masquerading as an English language translation of the Ukrainian Constitution to remain on its website for how many years? And then only recently take it down right now. They already know that there's a 20-year deadline concerning U.S. relations with Ukraine that comes up next week. Why did they take down the version of the Ukrainian Constitution they allowed to masquerade as legitimate on the Department of Justice website for all this time, at this time? Why? Why did they do that? Why are they trying to interfere with matters related to the separation of powers in the Ukraine, including at a time when there is a declaration of a state of war and they are currently at war with another country? Why did they do this? Let's talk about 14. What does 14 mean in this context? Does anybody remember what 14 meant on February 14th of 2018? How about within 30 days of February 14th of 2018? You know who I think would know? Canada. Maybe you should ask Canada what 14 means when it comes to events that happened between February and April of 2018. What's 14 mean? Is somebody trying to make a deal on some hawks? Huh? I know. Are we doves or are we hawks? Huh? Did you try to intentionally lean on Ukrainian hawks? And now what? You want to try to treat them like criminals? And what are you going to do about people that claim that they're members of the judiciary that are violating the goddamn Constitution and using biological weapons against their political opposition? That's a question. I'm here in Texas. I'm right here in the Northern District of Texas, where the U.S. District Court, right fucking here, has been doing the same thing. Along with the Supreme Court of Texas, right here. After being set in motion, events that ended up conspiring in the fall of 2019 evident in the schedule set by the Supreme Court of the United States. When are you guys going to get to the damn point? You don't like the offering? You don't like the bid? Well, guess what? Neither do I, right? And everything you fucking did was against the Constitution. You can't hide the Constitution. And what are you going to say? Well, we never had it. It was never there to begin with. It just doesn't exist. It was a delusion. You were having a hallucination. There's a chemical imbalance in your brain. You have a genetic disorder. We're going to give you some medication, and we're going to reprogram you. Right? Is that what you intend to do? And then who the hell do you get to pay for the health insurance for the next 10 to 12 years? No, thank you.